Neighbors keep sneaking my cat into their apartment, and despite all attempts to stop them, they're ignoring our pleas. We adore our cat, he's family. But, since he's a rescue, he brought some quirks along with him. One of the biggest? He absolutely must be an indoor-outdoor cat. Trust me, I've tried everything to transition him to an indoor-only life, and every attempt has ended in utter disaster. The minute I try to make him stay inside too long, he starts spraying pee around the house, scratching any door, any window, any blind in his path, and howling with this ear-splitting yowl that's even louder than any dog I've ever heard. He'll wake us up at night, prowl around during the day making everyone's lives miserable, and nothing seems to convince him otherwise. After the first wave of chaos, I took him to the vet and she told me the best fix would be to get him neutered. So I did that, but nothing about his behavior changed. I went back, desperate for advice, and she told me, given his age and his history, it was basically impossible to train these behaviors out of him. Her advice? Keep him fully vaccinated, but let him have his routines and outside time so we'd all stay sane and happy. I took that to heart. Luckily, he's a very territorial cat, and most of the cats in our area are the same, so he never strayed far from the backyard. Most days, I could peek out any time and see him lounging or prowling around the garden or the little patch of woods behind the house. We settled into a comfortable daily routine. Every morning, I'd call him from the porch and he'd come running for breakfast. After he finished eating, I checked him over for any scratches, scrapes, or flare-ups of his seasonal skin condition, and then he'd settle down for a nap. When it was time for our toddler's nap, the cat would head back outside. Sometimes he'd come in for dinner, sometimes not, and I always gave him a thorough look over before bedtime. If he had a cut or was suffering from dry skin, I'd pop his plush donut cone on his head, treat him with ointment or coconut oil, and keep him inside for a day or two. That routine worked like magic. For over 2 years. He followed it dutifully, and I felt like we'd finally cracked the code for keeping a spirited rescue and a young family in harmony. But then, about a year and a half ago, our upstairs neighbors moved in, a mother and her 2 kids, a son and a daughter. At first, the son just petted my cat in the yard now and then. Harmless, I thought. Then I caught them strolling together, and after that, he'd sit with my cat in the backyard for ages. I actually found it sweet. That is, until the day I found out he started taking our cat up into their apartment. Naturally, I spoke with his mother. She told me that sometimes, after their walks, our cat would just follow her son up to their place, and her son really loved cats. I wasn't upset, but I did ask that it not become a habit. My cat still needed his daily checkup, and if he spent too much time upstairs, he'd start avoiding me altogether when I called him. Things escalated. I discovered that her son was sneaking my cat in when his mom left for work. I should note, until recently, I genuinely thought this boy was still in high school. He has pronounced physical disabilities, so I assumed he was homeschooled for his own comfort. Then his mother casually mentioned, just a couple weeks ago, that her son is actually 23 years old. 23. I'm 25. Suddenly, everything took on a different feel. By now, the situation was out of control. My cat stopped coming when called for breakfast. I'd go days without even seeing him, which made managing his skin outbreaks nearly impossible. I was anxious and constantly searching for him. When he did come inside, he'd bolt straight for the neighbor's staircase, scratching at their door so desperately he tore up their door seal. The mother actually complained to my husband about the damage. My husband offered to fix it, but she declined and said we just needed to be more vigilant. I talked with her myself and repeated, again, that we'd replace the seal, but asked if she could please stop letting the cat in. I gave her my number and asked her to text me the next time our cat tried to come up so I could retrieve him before trouble started. She nodded along, but never once initiated contact. The only time she'd reply to me was when I already texted to ask if she'd seen my cat, and only then would she admit he was upstairs. But the real nightmare hit 2 weeks ago. Our cat came home with a nasty wound on his neck, a wound so bad he should have gone straight to the vet. The worst part? I didn't even know it happened. The upstairs son knocked on my door to tell my husband about it, and when my husband saw the wound, it was already mostly healed. When asked how long he'd known about it, the boy couldn't give a straight answer. My husband thanked him for the information but told him, once again, no more taking the cat upstairs. Guess what? As soon as my cat was healed and allowed outside, the boy brought him back upstairs. It never ends. The mother claims she doesn't want our cat hanging around, swears she refuses to buy a litter box no matter how often her son asks, and says she doesn't want to get in trouble with the landlord if our cat scratches things. But for every word she says, her actions never back it up. She only protests when called out. And the weirdest thing? Our cat is an atrocious hunter. He's got digestive problems and is on a strict diet, and I explicitly told the upstairs neighbor not to feed him. But the cat, who was a consistent 11 pounds for years, suddenly weighed 14 pounds at his last vet visit and keeps growing. Odds are, unless he's become some kind of master hunter overnight, someone's feeding him behind my back. Worse, his flea allergy is flaring up since his medicine doesn't work properly when he's overweight. Yes, he's microchipped. Yes, the neighbors know this. But I feel stuck. The son blatantly ignores me, the mother says what I want to hear but never acts, and my cat is caught in the middle, getting heavier and sicker and more distant each week. I have no idea what to do next. I'm at my wit's end with my upstairs neighbors and the way they keep trying to stake their claim on my cat. Ever since this new family moved in above us, everything's changed. For 2 years, my cat lived a perfectly happy, safe life. He had his routines, explored outside, and always came home. He never disappeared, never strayed too far, and I never had to worry, not until now. But then the neighbors moved in. Their son, who must be 10 or 11, seems to have developed this singular obsession with my cat. He calls him by a ridiculous name that isn't his, brags about finding him, and basically acts like he's his owner. When his mother's at work, he'll let himself onto our property and entice my cat away, sometimes holding onto him for hours, sometimes overnight. I have no idea if there's anything going on with him. Honestly, I've never asked, but I'm getting desperate. As strange as it sounds, I'm worried every time I see him outside. It's starting to jeopardize my cat's safety and well-being. They don't know how to care for a high-maintenance animal like mine. He's expensive, particular, and has medical needs, not something you hand off to just anyone, least of all to people who clearly don't know the first thing about him. I tried confronting the neighbors gently, multiple times. My husband, less gently, got into it with them as well. They brushed us off every time. I'm afraid of being too direct now because, honestly, what if they retaliate? What if they take it out on my cat? All I want is to spend Christmas with my cat, not spend the holidays sick with worry about where he's run off to, or who has him, or whether he's being fed the right food or kept safe and warm. I just wish we could go back to how things were before these neighbors showed up and turned everything upside down. We tried keeping him strictly indoors twice now, but every attempt has made us all absolutely miserable, my cat the most. Still, I'm wondering if consulting another vet, trying something new, is the only way forward, at least until things change. If you're wondering, we even tried a peace offering. 2 stray kittens showed up on our back porch this year, and I offered both to the neighbor boy's mother. Maybe if their son had his own cat, he'd stop obsessing over mine. She refused both times. We ended up handing the kittens over to a local rescue. Meanwhile, their fixation on my cat has only gotten worse. He's not interested in a new home. He isn't trying to move in with them, they're simply persistent, entitled, and refuse to let it go. He's my cat. I miss him just being mine, just being home, life as it was before our neighbors brought this endless weirdness into our lives. Update 1. Yes, my cat absolutely interacts with my other neighbors. And no, he's by no means a nuisance. He's got this sweet, uncanny ability to memorize the work schedules of 2 of my neighbors. He'll wait patiently on the sidewalk for them, right when he knows they'll be heading out to or coming back from the parking lot. It's like he's on his own personal mission of spreading affection. Then there's my elderly neighbor, who has become something of a routine companion for my cat. Every day, without fail, when my neighbor goes to get his mail, my cat falls in beside him and follows all the way to the mailboxes. All my neighbors seem to adore this little routine. Most days, someone will make a joke about how I've managed to raise the friendliest feline in the entire neighborhood. But here's the thing, despite all his neighborly antics, my cat has never once ventured up to anyone else's apartment. In fact, he refuses to even step inside the other building, almost as if he knows instinctively which spaces are off limits. This got me thinking, especially when I started comparing stories I'd heard from neighbors to what I've actually witnessed myself. For example, someone once told me that he loves hanging out in the upstairs apartment, but after watching his behavior, that really doesn't seem to add up. The same day these thoughts were swirling around in my head, I found my cat sporting yet another odd injury. That's when my concern really kicked into gear. Some people had mentioned how strange it was that, for 2 years straight, he barely got more than a scratch or a scab, and yet lately, the injuries seemed to be piling up. I started wondering, could my neighbor actually be hurting him, or maybe putting him in situations where he was likely to get hurt? My husband is skeptical of that theory, but still, we can't shake the feeling that there's more to the story. Now, there's also the possibility our cat is a bit older than we first thought. It's so tricky to guess the age of an adult cat. 3 years ago, the vet guessed he was maybe between 2 and 3, but she cautioned that her estimate might be off by as much as 3 years. If she was right, he'd be about 5 or 6 now, but with how much he's been getting hurt, his behavior, and how much more time he's choosing to spend indoors, we're starting to think he could actually be closer to 8 or 9. That would definitely explain why his medical conditions are ramping up as he ages. Given all this, we've decided to recommit to making him an indoor cat. It's been over a year and a half since our last serious push. This Christmas, we ended up rescuing yet another kitten. This one, our cat has been gently grooming, and sort of adopting as his own. Initially, we planned to send her to the rescue, like we had with past kittens, but this time, the rescue was full. Against all our original plans, we kept her, and she is just petrified by the outdoors. That's actually been a huge help. Her fear seems to be encouraging our cat to stay inside more, too. Still, I wanted to be prepared. Since our 4-month-old puppy needs to go outside every hour and a half for potty training, and that's usually when my cat tries to slip out with him, I bought a motion detection camera just in case. Now, even if my cat manages to escape, I can keep tabs on him, and, more importantly, keep a close eye on our neighbor. I don't want to be some sort of spy, but if I see our neighbor trying to lure my cat inside, I'll be ready to step in straight away. We've also realized that just being nice about our cat hasn't worked for us at all. Going forward, we're ready to be much more direct and confrontational if that's what it takes to keep him safe. Update 2. The camera paid for itself in 48 hours. Our puppy started his bored little whine at the door just before dawn. I cracked it open to jog him to the patch of grass, and my phone pinged with that new alert tone I still haven't gotten used to. I glanced down and there it was, a grainy clip of my upstairs stairwell, my cat's tail flagged high like a little comma. And, half a second later, the boy's hand, waving what looked like a plastic cup, tapping it like you'd tap a treat cup at a zoo. I could actually hear him whisper that ridiculous name. Then he chirped it again, high and breathy, like the secret password only they knew. I didn't even put shoes on. I told my husband to grab the puppy, snatched my hoodie and flew into the hall. The boy was halfway up the stairs already, my cat slung awkwardly over his arm like a sack of laundry, fighting and doing that angry, low mrrr he only makes when I try to wipe his paws. I said his real name and he jolted like someone plugged him into the wall. He wriggled free of the boy and launched for me, claws out, claws in, claws out, like he couldn't decide if he wanted to climb me or hide in my sweatshirt. The boy froze 2 steps above me, breathing hard. He said, very flat, he wants to come with me. I held my cat against my chest, felt his heart jackhammering, and told him, as calmly as I could, manage at 5 in the morning with my blood pressure somewhere in orbit, that my cat is not a toy and I meant what I said about not taking him inside. The mother opened her door with a towel turban and a toothpaste streak on her cheek and told her son to come back in. She looked at me, looked at my cat, and said, we're not buying a litter box, like that was the only point I'd made. By the time I got my cat settled with breakfast and a grooming, that post-adrenaline bath where they lick one spot with religious devotion for an hour, he had a collar on that I did not buy. A bright, plasticky blue with a bell. There was a cracked little tag attached. On one side, the ridiculous name. On the other, a phone number that is not mine. I took a photo, slid the collar off, and replaced it with the one I've been making him wear that says in enormous all caps do not feed. Medical diet. Call, my number. That afternoon, when the puppy started his next potty tap dance, my cat tried for the door again, and when he came back, my collar was gone. The bell was back. I scrolled the camera footage and watched a pale hand reach between the slats of the stair railing, 2 careful fingers pop the buckle, and the collar slip away out of frame like a magic trick. I saved the clip and emailed it to myself, twice. The thing that finally cut through the fog was a phone call I never expected to get. A clinic 20 minutes across town called me while I was in the produce aisle, because they had my cat on their table and his microchip had pinged my account. The woman on the phone sounded curious more than anything. Apparently a young man had brought in a found cat for shots, very urgent, didn't have any records. I pushed my cart into the end cap of apples so hard a Honeycrisp went bouncing, left everything, and drove there in my house sweater with my hair in a lopsided clip. I walked into the lobby and there he was, sitting on the floor with a blue loop of leash around his wrist like a bracelet, a carrier open at his feet, and my cat hunched inside, eyes huge and unblinking, his whole body jammed against the back corner. There were so many pieces of paper, one of those Petco vaccine printouts, a half-filled new client form, my cat's name crossed out with that ridiculous name written in careful, childish block letters. The tech behind the desk caught my eye, then my cat's face in the carrier, and then the boy. She asked him to step aside with her manager. She asked me for my driver's license. The manager popped open the carrier just enough to scan the chip again, like we were in a courtroom and she didn't want a mistrial. The mother arrived breathless and pink in the face a minute later and tried the words misunderstanding and only trying to help twice each, as if saying them that many times would earn her a punch card. I didn't raise my voice. I just told them it was over and lifted my cat's carrier and felt, for the first time in months, like I was actually taking him home. By the time I got to our front door, the copy of the lease was in my email. I'd sent the videos and the photo of the blue collar and the vet's incident notes to the property manager from the parking lot, and she responded so fast it made me wonder how many times she'd had to write that kind of message before. She said pets that aren't on their leash shouldn't be inside their unit, period, and trespassing on another tenant's patio or down their stairs is a violation. There was language about fines and notices and, if it continued, further action. That night there was a soft knock, and the mother stood on my mat with her hands clamped together like she was holding a tiny bird. She said she was sorry and that her son just gets attached and that they'll be more careful. I told her I'm also attached and that my cat had almost been vaccinated with something he can't have because of his allergy and that I have it all documented now. She said, we didn't know, and I said, I told you, and then there wasn't a lot left to say. An officer from the non-emergency line came by the next afternoon because the manager suggested a paper trail. He was patient and kind in that intentionally boring way that makes you want to cry because the boringness feels like safety. He watched the videos on my phone, wrote down the dates, and gave me an incident number that I stuck to the fridge with a magnet shaped like a chicken. He took a walk up the stairs and talked to them, and I could hear the boy's voice getting higher with each sentence and the mother saying, over and over, we understand. When he left, he told me it's not a crime to feed a wandering cat but it is a problem to take one and try to make it yours, and that if it happens again to call while it's happening. The next morning, for the first time in weeks, my cat didn't sit at the bottom of the upstairs steps and stare up like a kid outside a candy shop. He climbed onto the windowsill and fell asleep with his cheek spread on the glass like a fried egg. We built him a compromise. A hardware store catio that is mostly zip ties and optimism, tucked into the only rectangle of sun our back stoop gets, a ridiculous little enclosure with a chair I trash picked and scrubbed and a scratching post, with a ball that goes in circles that my toddler can't stop spinning. The first time I carried him out, he looked betrayed until he realized the sun was still the sun from inside a screen, and then he flattened himself into the concrete with the kind of bliss I honestly envy and had a dust bath worthy of a small antelope. The kitten pressed her face to the mesh with the same horrified fascination she reserves for the vacuum. The puppy peed on my shoe and then fell asleep with his nose under the catio, like they were having an undercover meeting. None of this turned him into an immediate saint. He still tries for the door when I'm juggling a diaper bag and a grocery bag and elbowing the puppy away from the recycling. But he's staying in longer without complaining. He's eating his prescription food without the frenetic, defensive gulp he was doing for a while, as if he had to pack in as much as possible before it disappeared upstairs. He stopped scratching his neck raw. When I brushed him yesterday afternoon, the brush didn't come away full of grainy flea dirt. He's been using the cardboard scratcher to sharpen his claws and doesn't paw at the front of their stairwell like a desperate, would-be boyfriend anymore. He sits in the window at dusk and watches the crows change shifts. 2 days ago, there was a bag on our doorknob with no note. Inside was a stuffed orange tabby with a ribbon tied clumsily around its neck. He looks nothing like my cat except that he is technically also shaped like a cat. My husband took him upstairs and handed him to the mother. She said, that was from me, and that she thought it might help. Later that night, my phone dinged, and the camera app showed a hand slipping a saucer of fish onto the bottom stair. It was barely a hand, really, just fingertips and a sleeve, but when I zoomed in, the hoodie had the same bleach-splattered cuff I'd seen in the vet lobby. I went down, picked up the plate, rinsed it, and texted her a photo of the timestamp. She didn't answer. For now, though, the house is ours again. My cat is on the back of the couch, tucked into that spiral cats make when they want to become a perfect, unbothered circle. The kitten keeps falling asleep halfway through grooming his forehead, like she can't decide if he's a parent or a pillow. The puppy learned how to ring the bell to go outside, and also learned that the bell is fun to ring even if you don't have to go, so I stand up and sit down a lot, and my cat looks up each time like he's keeping score. If they try again, I'll have the video and the incident number and, most importantly, a cat who's choosing the sunny windowsill over the stairs. That feels like the first real win we've had in a long time. Update 3. The first new thing was the sound of scissors. Not the satisfying snip of wrapping paper, but the heavy, sticky chew of dollar store blades trying to worry through plastic. The camera gave me a sleepy buzz at 2:11 a.m., and there he was on my screen, in the grainy green of night mode, crouched at the catio like a raccoon at a locked cooler. The mesh jittered, the zip ties pinged like tiny tuning forks. My cat was inside, puddled into himself, a rectangle of glinting eye and not much else. I hit the porch light and the boy flinched so hard he rocked backward onto his heels. We met eyes through the screen, both of us blinking, and I said his real name, my cat's, and he peeled himself away and bolted up the stairs with the scissors swinging on their little neon lanyard like a pendulum telling me yes, this is really happening at 2 in the morning. I didn't call 911, I dialed the non-emergency number with the weird calm you get when your hands are cold. The same officer from before came by. I recognized his evenness the way you recognize certain chain restaurants. He watched the clip on my phone and said, in that soft, factual way, that cut mesh is still tampering, that stepping onto our back stoop at 2 a.m. is still trespass, and then he'd go talk to them again. We stood together while he knocked. The mother opened the door with a robe tied so tight it made me cross my arms in sympathy. She said she didn't know. He said, and he was careful with it, now she did. We pulled the catio apart the next day and rebuilt it with hardware cloth so stiff it surrendered only if my husband leaned all his weight into the cutters. We graduated from zip ties to little carabiners that make it look like a hamster prison designed by a rock climber. My cat watched from the window with the offended hauteur of a foreman. When I carried him back out, he flung himself onto the indoor-outdoor rug and ground his cheek into it until static built up and his whiskers splayed with tiny pops. The next new thing was a phone call from the microchip company. I was in the pasta aisle this time, touching boxes like a sleepwalker, and the woman on the phone said, bright but puzzled, that someone had logged in and attempted to update ownership details. They'd used my cat's chip number and that other phone number from the blue tag. I said no, that wasn't me, and the woman said she had already flagged the account and added a note and would I like a PIN set up so no one could change anything without me? I said yes and spelled my childhood street 3 times to get it right. I put the phone down and realized I had been pressing my thumb into a box of rigatoni hard enough to leave a dent. Anonymously, someone also reported us to animal control for neglecting an outdoor cat. The van with a paw print on it pulled up in the middle of nap time, and a woman with a braid down her back and the kind of firm, friendly voice that makes dogs sit on instinct asked if she could take a look around. My cat was asleep on my husband's thigh like a meatloaf. The kitten was upside down with her mouth ajar like a dropped puppet. The puppy was in the crate doing slow, dramatic sighs because life is so hard when you can see people but not climb them. I showed her the prescription food and the flea meds and the vet's notes printed and stuck to the inside of our cabinet like a grocery list. She crouched, let my cat sniff her finger, and said he looked good to her. She made me a little star on her form and left me with a pamphlet called Keeping Busy Cats Busy and a feeling like I wanted to sleep for 3 days. What broke me wasn't any of that. It was the laminated certificate taped to their door the next morning, a glossy thing with a gold foil paw stamp and a cursive font that made my eye twitch. Emotional support animal, it said, and underneath, the ridiculous name, and underneath that, a photo, my photo, from my camera, cropped to make my cat's nose look like it was thinking about a modeling career. I took a picture from the landing. I sent it to the property manager. She emailed back so fast I could see my phone light up on my lock screen while I stood there on the stairs. An ESA letter does not permit a tenant to take possession of another tenant's pet. Please continue to document. We have issued a final notice. That night the knock was shaky. The mother stood on my mat with her hair wet and her mascara gently giving up. She said they'd gotten the email and she didn't know what else to do and she could not afford fines and her son was not sleeping. He had fixated, and she didn't say the word but it hung there anyway. I said I could help in the one way I knew how. I said I would pay the adoption fee if she let me come with them to the shelter and pick a cat who could actually live inside their apartment, a cat who wouldn't need a half-acre of perimeter to feel sane. I said I would buy a litter box and food and a scoop with a long handle, because I have learned some things in this life and one is that your back gets old before you do. She stared at me as if I'd offered her a helicopter. I know she could have said yes months ago. I know. But sometimes a door doesn't open until you've run face first into the wall beside it enough times. We went on a Tuesday afternoon because that's when the website said they were less busy. The shelter smelled like detergent and damp paper and soft wet animals. The boy was very quiet. The adoption counselor guided us past spider plants and reading chairs to a room labeled Overlooked Friends. Inside was a bench and a plexiglass window with little nose prints at cat height. The first cat we met hid her entire self under a towel and breathed like a tiny accordion. The second, a skinny teenage who vibrated when you looked at him, wrapped himself around the boy's forearm like a bracelet. The third was a particular shade of brown tabby that always makes me think of grocery store bread. He had one ear like a crushed chip and a tail that ended a little shorter than nature intended. He lay on the bench like a warm sandbag and, when the boy's hand hovered, he leaned forward like a ship easing off its mooring and set his face against the boy's knuckles. The boy's shoulders went down in a way I hadn't seen since they moved in. We did the paperwork. I slid my card across the counter and pretended it was for something more ordinary than deciding, in a fluorescent room, that we were drawing a circle around a living thing and agreeing not to let it break. The mother asked for the quietest litter box we had and selected the loudest possible shade of blue, which felt like some kind of poetry. We carried everything up their stairs together. The cat, who had a name like a hymn that didn't suit him, blinked solemnly from the carrier and then stepped out and discovered, with visible delight, the hollow underneath their couch. It wasn't a movie. He hid for a day and a half and then appeared like a small god in the doorway and asked for dinner in a voice like a rubber duck. The boy sent me a photo of him draped like a stole across his lap and a string of hearts that made me feel old and soft. The mother texted me at 3 a.m. to ask how often to scoop and whether baking soda goes under or on top. Twice I typed the answer with my eyes closed and then got up anyway and leaned over our railing and whispered it down to her like we were in a very domestic monastery. The things in our apartment changed without fanfare. The blue bell collar stopped appearing. No more cups tapping the air. No more plates materialized on our stairs. I had to retrain my ear to not flinch at any sound on the landing. My cat picked a new favorite, the gap behind the armchair where the heater clicks lightly to itself, a place that makes him smell like warm dust if you bury your nose in his fur. He's lost a pound without me trying. He moves like his joints were oiled with something subtle and expensive. The kitten has learned how to bean him in the face with a paw without actually extending her claws, a skill I admire in a woman. The puppy learned that ringing the bell 11 times in a row does not open a portal to a park, only a slightly more exasperated version of me. Today, my elderly neighbor shuffled by with his mail key and my cat went to the window as if summoned by a string. The boy was on the sidewalk at the same time with the blue litter scoop like a scepter and their new cat in the crook of his arm, all settled biscuit and threadbare purr. He looked up at our window and lifted the scoop in a salute I chose to take as friendly, and my cat blinked and, with the regal majesty of someone swatting aside a petition, yawned. I still have the cameras. I still have the incident numbers stuck to the fridge under that dumb chicken magnet. The mesh is still tight as a drum. The landlady sent an email saying, "Thank you for working this out proactively," which made me laugh and then want to lie down. Maybe it holds. Maybe it only holds as long as novelty glitters in their living room and the blue litter box doesn't feel like defeat. But for now, the only ridiculous name in my house is the one my toddler calls the puppy, Sir Barkington, with absolute conviction, and the only thing tapping cups is me, on the counter, when I'm trying to get my cat to notice that his dinner is ready. He ignores me, on principle, and then sees the bowl and makes that low, thrilled chirp he only makes for food and blackbirds, and comes anyway. That's enough. For now, that feels like the right size of piece. Update 4. The first new thing was the building itself having a panic attack. The alarms went off in the jagged way that grabs the back of your brain and shakes, and every door in the hallway unlatched like they were sighing. Somewhere a maintenance guy was testing for 15 minutes between noon and 2, which is landlord for exactly during nap. The puppy windmilled in a tiny hurricane of paws. The kitten did that Halloween cat sideways hop at nothing. My cat turned into a flattened rug under the bed with one paw still sticking out like he'd been tagged mid-flea and decided that meant he was safe. I was coaxing him with my softest voice and a treat he doesn't actually like when something moved wrong. Upstairs, a thump, the kind with velocity. The boy's new cat shot down the corridor like an arrow out of a quiver, a brown streak with that stubby tail like a little exclamation point. He pinged off our doorframe, made a choice between the bright rectangle of the stairwell and the dark rectangle of under the stairs, and dived into the dark. The alarm sawed the air into pieces, the boy's voice cracked on the syllables of a name that still doesn't fit. The mother's robe trailed like a comet tail as she went past me. I said I'd look down here and she nodded without quite seeing me. Under the stairs there's a panel nobody thinks about until you do. 4 screws, painted over twice, the kind of thing that probably hides haunted Victorian pipes or a very small ghost. I remembered it because the elderly neighbor told my husband once, leaning on his cane like a podium, that when the building was put up the contractor forgot a hammer back there and it sang in winter. My hands were already shaking from the alarms and the puppy's chorus, but I got a screwdriver and put my thumbnail into the first notch and felt the thread give with a crack like a tiny knuckle. The boy's feet thudded overhead, then back, then overhead again, the way he does when he can't figure out where to put his worry. I killed our breaker to the doorbell because it was ringing like a possessed object and stuck my ear to the panel and heard it, a skittering, a fragile scrabble, the echo of a question mark. I said his name, the new cat's, the him one, and the sound went quiet in that way that means something is listening. The alarms cut off like someone hit the artery. The sudden absence felt like a thick blanket. We all stood very still and the building breathed in again. I texted the mother, under the stairs. She texted back, locked out in hallway and then immediately, coming. I slid the last screw into my pocket because it felt like a good luck charm and eased the panel back just enough to get an eye in. It was a crawl space, but only in the childhood sense, more like a stunted artery of dust. I could make out the cat by his eyes, coins in a slot machine. He went even stiller when I moved. I backed away. Can I bring mine? I asked through the ceiling, which is not how phones work but felt right, and she said, choked, yes. I tried the harness we bought and never conquered. He came to me out from under the bed with a grumpy professionalism that made me want to kiss his feet. I slid the harness over his shoulders like a sweater and did the buckle with the speed of someone defusing a bomb while a toddler narrates the color of every wire. He sat down, offended, immediately. At the panel I let him sniff. He stuck his head in as far as spite would allow. He made that low conversational brrrp he saves for moths and my husband. I said the new cat's name again and my cat answered like a call and response at a small church. There was a delicate shuffle. The boy was on his stomach on the landing above us, cheek pressed to the hallway carpet, one hand with that blue scoop like a talisman, the other reaching with a can of the wet food we'd bought with them at the shelter. He tapped it once, twice, the sound damp and familiar. The new cat made a shape out of the shadows that looked like a question turning into a decision. We made a stupid tunnel with what we had. 2 flattened Amazon boxes from the recycling, my sweatshirt, the old bath mat I've been meaning to throw out. The mother held the end open with her hand like she was waiting to receive a baby bird. The boy whispered in a voice so soft it almost didn't exist. My cat, who is as nosy as a daytime talk show, stuck his entire face into the business end and sneezed theatrically, and something about that broke the spell enough that the new cat gave up on pride and came forward in an inching, pressed way that made me ache. He collapsed into the sweatshirt like a boxer between rounds. The boy scooped him with both arms and a small, leaked sound came out of him that made me look away because there are some things you shouldn't stare at directly. Maintenance picked that exact second to walk up brandishing a clipboard. He peered down at me, the open panel, the cat burrito, the blue scoop like a scepter, and said, "Everything good?" In a way that meant please tell me this is not a plumbing thing. I showed him the screws in my palm. He relinquished a little roll of painter's tape so I could mark which screw went to which hole because I told him they remember. He did not argue with that because we both felt a little superstitious by then. Upstairs, the mother had the bathroom door closed, the litter box like a blue punctuation mark in the tub. We listened to the rustle and clink and scratch. The boy was sitting on the floor with his knees up, the scoop laid across them like a sword at a dubbing. He looked up at me and said my cat's real name, correctly, like a password he'd finally earned. It hit me with the same weird relief as the alarm stopping. 2 hours later the building was back to its normal small symphony, the heater trilling like a cricket, someone's TV muted into the hallway, my toddler narrating absolutely everything the puppy did like a sports announcer who favors the underdog. My cat had retired to the catio like an emperor and was practicing loafing. The kitten had a plastic ring and was rolling it in an infinite, serious circle. I put the panel back with my lucky screws. My phone buzzed with an email from the property manager about the alarm testing. We apologize for any inconvenience, and, hilariously and perfectly timed, an automated follow-up about final notice has been acknowledged, a cold bureaucratic sentence that suddenly felt like a warm blessing. At dusk there was a zip-top bag on our doorknob. Inside, the blue bell collar, the tag, the ridiculous name scratched so hard it went silver around the letters. There was also a drawing on a folded piece of paper, lined, the kind that bleeds a little when you press too hard. 2 cats, wildly disproportioned, one with a squashed ear and a short tail, one with a round, judgmental face I recognized uncomfortably well. Between them, my cat's name in the boy's careful block letters, spelled right, underlined twice. No note. It didn't need one. That night I let my cat choose. The door to the patio stayed latched. The house was warm and full of the lazy, heavy quiet after a scare. He inspected every corner as if we'd rearranged the molecules while he napped. He ate his dinner like a person who trusts the next meal is coming. He jumped onto the back of the couch with the grace of something whose edges have softened. When I tapped the bowl later, out of habit, he ignored me, on principle, and then, as always, came anyway. Upstairs, through the ceiling, I could hear the muffled thud of a scoop in litter, steady and domestic and perfectly ordinary, which felt like the sweetest sound, the sound of a new groove being worn into a life where mine is left whole.